Today we're going to talk about Joseph and his... Quick side note, why does every retelling of the story of Joseph put such a heavy emphasis on his coat? It's there for like a chapter. What's up, all you Bible-loving Jesus freaks? Welcome to First Methodist Youth. We are finishing our series this week on families, and we are going to be talking about forgiveness, and we're going to be looking at that through the lens of the story of Joseph. I mean, let's just be real. At some point, we are all going to need to forgive or be forgiven by our families. Sometimes that can be easy, but other times when we've been hurt badly, that can be really hard. Now, during this series, we've been making a distinction between the typical family and the atypical family. And the atypical family, for the purposes of this series, are the ones who do the atypical thing and follow God's will for their lives. When it comes to forgiveness, the typical family will often let hurts go unresolved until they end up in bitterness and broken relationships, or even revenge. But the atypical family know that their relationships are too valuable to lose, and they choose forgiveness over bitterness. But like I said earlier, that can be very difficult, so how do we do that? Before we jump into this though, pause this video and have a conversation with your small group if you're watching this with them. Have you ever gotten into a big fight with a family member, but now looking back on it, you're able to laugh about it? And if so, what was the fight about? What's something that would be easy to forgive a family member for? And what's something that would not be easy to forgive a family member for? So go ahead and take a few minutes to discuss this with your small group, or if you're by yourself, go ahead and just journal about it. It's good for us to kind of check in with ourselves and know where we're at with forgiveness, how hard or easy it might be for you. Catch you on the flip side. Nobody says that anymore. Welcome back. So far in this series, we've talked about Adam and Eve and their descendants, Abraham and Jacob, and this week we're going to talk about Jacob's kiddos, specifically Joseph. It's a long story, and we're not going to go over the whole thing. If you want to get the Spark Notes for it, the Bible Project has a very good video about it up on their YouTube channel. And there's also, as you saw previously, a 70s rock musical adaptation of the story. So you've got options. Oh, and VeggieTales. You can't forget VeggieTales. But we are going to look a little closer at Joseph's relationship with his family. And if you think that his father Jacob learned anything about being a good parent from his own childhood, well, prepare to be disappointed. If you have a Bible, go ahead and read along. We're going to be in Genesis 37. Now, Jacob loved Joseph more than any of his other sons, because he was the son of his old age. And he made him a robe of many colors. And when his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all of his brothers, they hated him and could not speak peacefully to him. Hey, Jacob, yeah, you know how your father played favorites and it nearly destroyed your relationship with your family? Be a real jerk move if you did that with your kids. Now, Joseph had a dream, and when he told it to his brothers, they hated him even more. He said to them, "Hear this dream that I have dreamed. Behold, I was binding sheaves in the field, and behold, my sheaf arose and stood upright. And behold, your sheaves gathered around it and bowed down to my sheaf." His brothers said to him, "Are you indeed to reign over us? Or are you indeed to rule over us?" So they hated him even more for his dreams and for his words. Then he dreamed another dream and told it to his brothers and said, "Dude, quit while you are ahead. Behold, I have dreamed another dream. Behold, the sun, the moon, and 11 stars were bowing down to me." But when he told it to his father and to his brothers, his father rebuked him and said to him, "What is this dream that you have dreamed? Shall I and your mother and your brothers indeed come to bow ourselves to the ground before you?" and his brothers were jealous of him. But his father kept the saying in his mind. Now, I'm not going to defend what Joseph's brothers do next, but let's be honest, Joseph is not doing himself any favors. Like, everybody knows the only thing worse than having a sibling who is the clear favorite is when that sibling rubs it in your face. Now, in the VeggieTales version of this story, and the DreamWorks version too, actually, now that I think about it, Joseph is kind of like this naive, happy-go-lucky guy who doesn't realize how much he's ticking his brothers off with all of this. But let's be very clear. He's 100% rubbing it in their faces. And Joseph's brothers get so ticked off by all of this that they decide to kill him. Now, thankfully, they don't. They throw him in a well and then sell him into slavery and then fake his own death, which, I mean, improvement? Needless to say, the punishment did not fit the crime here. And so, years later, through a crazy series of events, Joseph manages to go from a prisoner in Egypt to the right-hand man of the Pharaoh. And a famine comes upon the land, and he's the guy in charge of feeding everyone. And who should come to him looking for food but his brothers? Now, Joseph is angry, and rightfully so, and he kind of messes with them for a little bit, which, I mean, who can blame him for? But ultimately, this is how the story ends. This is Genesis 50, starting in verse 15, after the death of Jacob. When Joseph's brothers saw that their father was dead, they said, "It may be that Joseph will hate us and pay us back for all the evil that we did to him." So they sent a message to Joseph, saying, "Your father gave this command before he died. Say to Joseph, 'Please, forgive the transgression of your brothers and their sin, because they did evil to you. And now please forgive the transgression of the servants of the God of your father.'" Quick side note here, Jacob never said that, but I mean, I guess lying about something like that is like the least they've done at this point. I don't know, man. Joseph wept when they spoke to him. His brothers also came and fell down before him and said, "Behold, we are your servants." But Joseph said to them, "Do not fear, for am I in the place of God? As for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, to bring it about that many people should be kept alive, as they are today. So do not fear. I will provide for you and your little ones." Thus he comforted them, and he spoke kindly to them. Joseph had every reason to hate his brothers. More than that, he was in a position where he could have taken his anger out on them and gotten away with it. But instead, he chooses forgiveness over bitterness. What do you guys think? Take a moment to pause this video and talk about it with your small group. If you were Joseph, how would you have felt about your brothers, and how do you think you would have responded when they needed help? And you have to be honest about this. No good Christian answers here. What's one thing we can learn about forgiveness from Joseph's story? And finally, do you think forgiveness is a one-time decision or a process or both? Tell us why. We'll see you back here in a few minutes. Ready, break! It started raining, so if there's like random thunder in the rest of this, blame him. I want to talk about some things that we can learn from this story and scripture in general about forgiveness and how we can begin that process. But as always, with any complicated topic, I've got to put some big qualifications around this. Qualification number 1, take everything I'm about to say with a big, in general statement at the beginning. Every situation is different. If you think you might be struggling with forgiveness or how to forgive, or even if you need to forgive in a particular situation, please talk to me or one of the leaders about this. You can contact us at any time. Qualification number 2, and this is the important one, if any member of your family has hurt you or continues to hurt you, either emotionally or physically or sexually, what we're about to talk about does not apply to you. If this is your story, God is not telling you to protect them from the consequences of their actions or let them back into your life. That's not what the Bible is talking about when it talks about forgiveness. Please tell a trusted adult or a pastor at the church immediately. Don't even finish this video. With that said, if that is not your story, then Let's talk about forgiveness. Like I said, I think we can learn some important principles from this story in the Bible in general that I want to take a moment to outline for you guys. First, and it sounds obvious, but be honest with yourself about how you've been hurt. It's easy to brush it off or just not deal with it or feel like you shouldn't be complaining about it, but that's not the same as forgiveness. That can lead to bitterness and make forgiveness even more difficult down the road. Joseph never ignored what his brothers did to him, and dealing with that pain is an important part of the forgiving process. Second, understand that forgiveness is a process. Joseph had years to work through his anger, but when he finally saw his brothers again, he struggled to forgive them. You're not a bad person if you struggle with forgiveness. Be patient with yourself. Admit to God that you're struggling and ask Him to help. The important thing is that you're moving towards forgiveness instead of staying stuck in your anger. Third, find meaning in your pain. Notice what Joseph says to his brothers. You planned evil, but God used those plans for good. That doesn't mean that what his brothers did to him was a good thing or that God wanted that to happen. But finding meaning in our pain can help us with the forgiveness process. And finally, practice empathy. In Matthew 18, Jesus tells this parable of a man in millions of dollars of debt, but he has that debt forgiven. And yet, when he meets his friend who owes him only a couple of dollars, he refuses to forgive his friend and throws him in jail. One of the points Jesus is trying to make in this story is that we tend to want forgiveness to be unconditional for ourselves, but conditional for all the people who have hurt us. In my experience, forgiveness is an exercise in empathy. It requires me to understand why somebody did what they did and acknowledge that I might have done the same thing in their position. It doesn't make what they did okay, but it forces me to recognize my own imperfections and to extend the same forgiveness to others that I would want for myself. Forgiveness is an important part of healing and moving on from the things that have hurt us. Rather than staying stuck in our anger, it allows us to be open to relationships and to live into the plan God has for our lives. It's not your job to fix your family. But if you want to see your family used by God to do atypical things in the world, you have a role to play, and forgiveness might be a part of that. That's all I have for you guys today. This concludes our series on families. Come find out what next week brings. But for now, go ahead and break out into your small groups. Finish the discussion there. I will see you guys later. I love y'all. I miss your faces. I will see you next time.